Welcome to episode 42 of Let's Talk Money with Wendy Silibi. My guest for today is someone I hold very dear in my heart. Her name is Bulin, a marketing executive at one of the big banks. Those who know will know because the color of my shirt is communicating. But I'm not going to say much because she's not here in her capacity as what she does at the bank, but she's here in her personal capacity. So, Buli, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I finally made it.
Yes.
Oh, Mama, I made it finally to get to sit in this chair.
You're
It's such an
kidding.
honor.
Hey? Yeah, and I must say that it's such a great pleasure for me to host you more podcasting, So maybe before we go any further, let's just understand who is Buli. Where do you come from? Where were you born? Yeah, Buli Kima.
So, as you've introduced, Bulin Ndlovu, Nombulelo is the full name. Born, bred, raised in Pimville, Soweto. I like to call it Pimville Estates. Come from a very loving family. Thankfully, both my parents still alive. I'm still married. I've got an older brother, so I grew up with my older brother, Tato. And we really just come from a loving home, a warm home. My parents did everything that they could in their powers to really set us up for success in life, which I'm really, really grateful for. Now I'm married, got a family, so I'm a wife, I'm a mother. As you rightfully pointed out, I'm a marketing professional. But I'm also following in your footsteps. I'm an author. So I'm an author of a children's book that I published last year. I developed a platform called Monday Reflections, where I just write about my musings. It's really around leadership and inspiration. And yeah, I'm just a girl from Pimville, I guess.
Yeah. Hi, Buli. I've not seen your book. How come?
Because it's a children's book. You're not the target market, but I'll share it with you.
But you should have actually brought the book.
I should have.
So that people can get to see the book. But anyway, because I know I'll forget at the end, where do they get the book?
So the book it's available online. So when you Google it, I'm still in the process of getting my distribution set up. But it's a book inspired by my son, who was 5 years old at the time, and he was getting ready to go to big school. So it's really about a teacher and a little boy who they just had the most special relationship, and how this teacher really gave him wings and prepared him for the big world out there.
Sure.
So that book is really around teaching confidence to little kids who are just trying to step out and find their own voice in the world.
Wow. And I love your Monday reflections. They are on LinkedIn.
Yes.
For those who'd like to, go through them. Every Monday, I'm the first one to rush there to see what the Monday reflection is about. So I am, one of your greatest supporters.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, let's talk about money, because that's what we are talking about here. Your early recollections about money. Your knowledge of money. Where did you learn about money? Were you taught about money, or are you self-taught?
Sure. I think my early reflections about money are just knowing gore tšhelete I cannot tšhelete. Whenever you'd ask for money at home to do whatever, I cannot tšhelete was kind of the answer. And so that kind of then starts becoming your reference point of money. You see money from a place of lack. You see money from a place of, you don't see it from a place of abundance. And so growing up, I've always been, and even now, saving is a very important part for me. I can't necessarily say I learned that or I was taught that somewhere, but it just, I suppose, coming from that place of I never wanted to find myself in a position of not having money, or not having money for the things that I wanted to be able to do. So the principle and the discipline of saving, I started, a very long time ago. So whenever I would get whatever little pocket money, how to like carry, I would stash a little bit aside, for whatever. I didn't even have goals in mind for it, but I'd always be stashing money aside. And as you get older, you start realizing that some of those principles are actually good principles to have. And so even now, my view of money is actually, now it's not from a place of lack. I really don't like to view money from a place of lack. I consider myself, and I always say even to my friends, I say, when you have an open hand, the money it comes back to you, right? So I generally don't like holding on to money from a place of lack, but rather viewing it from a place of abundance. And when you view it from a place of abundance, then you have more than enough. You have enough to save. You have enough to give. You have enough to spend. You have enough to use. You have enough for what you needed to do. So that's really my view on money.
Yeah. Hey, you're one of the lucky or fortunate people that, from hearing akina chelete, harina chelete, that, because they say that, our money personalities are shaped from a young age, from what we hear and what we see. And then, and as you know, that there are those money personalities that they talk about, you could have easily maybe become a penny pincher.
Absolutely.
Because of that lack mentality, of the fear of not having. But actually, you became the opposite. You became a good saver, and your outlook towards money is the total opposite of what other people become.
100%.
Yeah, and I just love the fact that you have this principle. This principle. We should never look at money from a place of lack, but from a place of abundance, and that's what you attract.
Absolutely.
Because whatever things that you say, that's what you attract. And the principle of giving. I love talking about it, Uri. When you open your hand to give, it's that principle of reciprocation.
Absolutely.
Because blessed is the hand that gives than the one that receives.
Exactly.
Yeah. So would you say that where you are now financially is where you've always dreamt or envisioned you would be, or are you still working towards getting somewhere?
That's a very interesting question. It's interesting in the sense that when I reflect on where I am now financially, I feel like I have enough for what I need.
Okay.
Can I have more? Absolutely. Do I want more? Absolutely. But if I'm honest with myself, what I have is enough for what I need at this point in time. So there's no sense of this, I don't know if it's, I don't want to call it greed, but this hunger for more. I absolutely feel like what I have is sufficient for where I am right now.
Yeah.
And what I don't have, and I mean, I even in the things that I want, if I don't have, I just don't get it.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with it because I know I can't have it right now, but I can save for it and have it a little bit later.
Yeah.
I was chatting to a friend of mine, and we're talking about cars and stuff like that. And she saw that I was driving a car, which I then changed because the mileage, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so then I said to her, the car that I want, I can't afford it right now. But because I can't afford it right now, I'm not going to settle for something else. So I'm going to wait and save up for this car that I want so that I'm able to get it on my terms and not just because I want it now. So this whole idea of instant gratification, we teach it to children. I teach it to my 6-year-old around, we have our Friday dates. And I say to him, so the one time it was raining, I picked him up from school, it was a Thursday. I said, do you want to go for ice cream today or do you want to go for ice cream tomorrow? Which is our date. And he sat there and he had to think about and weighed up his options because he knew our Friday dates become very special. It's a very elaborate time that we have. And even though he wanted that ice cream on the Thursday, he said, no, I'll wait for our Friday dates. And I think similarly with us, it's the same. If you want something, the whole instant gratification thing can come into play, or you can say, actually, I can wait. So maybe just to go back to answer your question, where I am now in my life, in my finances, I'm okay.
Yeah.
I have enough for what I need. I've got sufficient finances to sustain me.
I like that, which is the principle of having enough and being at peace with where you are, because many a times, we want even more when we don't need it. And that's where the greed part comes in. You just remind me of that scripture that talks about money,
Yeah.
that people misinterpret anyway, that talks about, that the excessive love of money is the
100%.
root of all evil. Because if you have enough for the things that you need, once you start wanting excess, that's where the greed comes in. And then you start doing things that are out of character.
Yeah.
Because now you are pushing yourself beyond what you really need, and you ask yourself, it's because you never got to a point of contentment.
Absolutely.
So contentment is such an important space. And also, you share such an important principle. If you can't afford it, wait.
Just wait for
Save
it.
up for it,
Absolutely.
Why are you in a hurry? Just because you want this instant
Now.
gratification, you want it now. And I love it that you're teaching your son that, you have to wait for that time and not want instant gratification. The principle of being patient, with the things that you want. That is so, so powerful. And I'm hoping that the people that are listening to us will take something out of what we are saying. Or be content with what you have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think another thing for me that I didn't mention, which is also actually, as you're talking, I'm reflecting on it, and it's a big principle that allows for that contentment, is gratitude.
Yes.
I think I'm very fortunate in that ke Setswana se reng, or ke Sotho, bitso lebe ke seromo. And the opposite is also true, right? Bitso le lentle. And my name Nombulelo means gratitude, and so I lead from a place of gratitude. And so I'm always mindful of being grateful of that which I have, and that's what makes me content.
Yeah.
That if I don't have, I'm still blessed, I'm
Yeah.
still grateful, I'm still thankful for what I do have. And what I don't have right now, I can certainly wait for it.
I like that, hey? And I always share this principle, Lebatu, when we talk about cars. People always challenge me, wow, so change koloi. We thought how you could retirement to. I'm like, I'm so happy with my car right now. And whenever I teach young people about finances, I say to them, you can see someone driving a German car. They are over indebted. And I mean, I'm not against German cars, and I'm not against people driving German cars.
beautiful.
Let's just make it clear. But and if you can afford it and you've planned well,
Absolutely.
so good, But sometimes people overdo it because they're not they're not content, and maybe they're competing. This car, as I afford you, miserable, because they always say, I'd rather be miserable in a German car than be miserable
thank you.
in a Skotonki, and then you see somebody coming in a small car. You are driving in this beautiful car, you are in the fast lane, and you are absent-minded. Utsamaka 60 more fast lane, and ona uitlela ka koloi fully paid
so.
up. And you know what? Uletsa music video dropile le chair, usigile le pigo.
Yeah.
And then wow hutela or so, and you're thinking, why am hutela oka kolenyan? It's because they're content.
They're very happy with who
they're
they
in
are.
a happy place. So we need to be content with where you are, with where we are. So I really like that principle of gratitude. So, have you ever made any financial mistakes? And if you have, what are the lessons that you've learned from them?
Oh, goodness. I think I've made many, particularly when I was younger. But it's mistakes I don't regret, to be honest. And I'm glad they happened when they happened. After my first real job, I was working for about 2 years or so. So I accumulated provident fund nyana or pension fund nyana. And when I then changed jobs, instead of transferring that money to, the new place that I was moving to, I was like, cash out my money. I want to buy. I can't even remember. And that's the thing. I can't even remember what I bought. I don't know if it was a deposited koloi. I can't remember what I did with that money.
Yo.
But I remember I boxa chelete eo.
Yo.
And that was a big mistake because we know that, when you're building your pension fund or your retirement funds, the best thing you can have is time in the market, right? The best thing you can have is time and accumulating it over time, or any investment, the returns are better over time. So had I known better then, I probably wouldn't have boxed that money. I would have transferred it into the next investment, or whatever it was. But that was a lesson learned.
Yeah.
And as I say, I don't regret it because I do think the biggest lessons come from making mistakes.
Yeah.
The biggest lessons that you learn as an individual, the biggest growth doesn't come from just when I doing things right the whole time. Then there's no room for growth.
Yeah.
I do think the biggest lessons come from making those errors and learning from them. And I certainly learned. I never did that again. That's for sure. I never did that again. And as I say, I was in my 20s. I was young. And when I reflect on that time, it needed to happen for me to learn that lesson.
Yeah.
I would hate for me to learn that lesson at my age now.
Yeah.
When I'm more closer to retirement. I mean, still got a few more years to go.
Well, I'm
closer to retirement than closer to when I started working.
I know, yeah.
But I'd rather have made that mistake back then than making it today.
Yeah.
When now it's like, it's crunch time. I need to have a plan in place. So absolutely, I've made financial mistakes. That was probably the biggest one that I've made. I can't think of another big one, but I'm certain I've made financial mistakes.
Yeah, and our financial mistakes, our learning curves.
Absolutely.
Our university. You know, if you haven't been to university, that's where you get the best lessons. And I think the power there is to learn from those mistakes and make sure you don't repeat them.
Absolutely.
And for someone that's watching us, that's thinking of resigning and taking their pension and, boxing it for something that they will not even remember, and especially if they're over their 20s, 30s
in
and
your
whatever.
30s, worst time.
Yeah, and if you think about it, Bulin, two-pot system, they're giving people the opportunity to tap into your retirement funds, and people are taking it so light. For after all, I worked for it, let me enjoy it now, not understanding, the consequences of those withdrawals at a later stage, because when you reach the age of retirement, your income ceases, and as you withdraw, you are actually reducing the money that you're going to be receiving. You're reducing the power of the compounding interest.
Absolutely.
And so by the time you go on retirement, there's so little that you are actually going to be benefiting from. I always tell people, when you go on retirement, nobody pays you a salary. You now pay yourself a salary from the income that has ceased to come in.
Absolutely.
And that's something that people don't get, while they're still dipping into their provident fund, but resigner, but the businesses are failing, but deeper into the two-pot system. So I think those are just some of the many mistakes that people make that, as we are engaging, they should avoid.
And particularly women, I think, when you look at the lifespan of a woman, it's been proven time and time again that women tend to outlive men, right? So we live longer. So in that longer living, you want to maintain your quality of life.
Yeah.
And so, I'd really implore women, particularly because, there's so many issues that we face as women, whether it's the gender parities, we don't get paid as much as our male counterparts, et cetera, et cetera. So we almost have to work twice as hard in ensuring that by the time we get to retirement, we have those reserves that will carry us for the rest of our lives, in essence, in a way that will serve us, in a way that will maintain the quality of our lives.
Yeah, because research tells us that women indeed live longer than men, about 10 years
It's a long time.
Yeah, so means that at latter parts of many women, and touch wood, it doesn't happen to us, they live their lives, as widows.
Yeah.
And I mean, with the way things are happening now, Libana, they die before their parents. So you find you're a widow, you have grandchildren that you have to look after. Kamo unodlala ka tšhelete ya hao ya pension, unso how transfer misebetsi, you were not saving enough, and all of that. And these are things that we need to be thinking about. And this means that women have to be very intentional about their investment and their savings journey. And actually, that was going to be my next question, to you, but I'm glad that you touched on it. And so I want to also come to this point. Ibile bare, women, in one of the research articles, but women prefer to talk about death than talk about money.
Absolutely.
And that is why we have these stokvel so where we are just saving for death and we never save for life. How do we get women to start saving for living and not for dying? And I think I'd like you to share these strategies, and maybe we can look at that 50, 30, 20 principle, and anything that you think would help women start shape their investment strategies.
You mentioned that I work for one of the big banks, and a couple of years ago we ran a campaign which was really trying to get the nation, or spark in the nation, to have a conversation about money. And it was so scary to realize how very few people are comfortable talking about money. We'd much rather talk about our body weight. We'd much rather talk about anything else except when it comes to money, I mean, even this whole stigma of, I can't show you my payslip, you can't know how much I earn. That whole, there's this stigma and secrecy around just money, and where money is viewed as evil, almost, in a sense. And I think we need to break completely out of that as a start, right? There's no way we're going to get to even having conversations about wealth building and legacy and stuff like that if we can't talk about the basics of chelete and debt, So we need to start just having those open conversations. And I realized, once we started having those conversations, there's so much that you learn and that you pick up. There's so many myths that get bust, for you, that you've been sitting with. Earlier we spoke about the things that you grow up with, the narratives that you hear, the stories that you're told that are imprinted and form core memories in your mind, and then how you do things. Some of those things are not true. Some of those things are not real. But you'll never get to that place of understanding and knowing better unless we start having those conversations. So I think any strategy for me, but beyond getting to the markets and the shares and the this and the that, let's start by talking about money. What is money? How does money move? How does money change hands? How do you start? People think investing is these, you hear about offshore and markets and shares and trading, and you're just like, yo, not for me. But it doesn't start there. Qala ganyane. Qala ganyane, when your salary comes in, have a sit and start a budget. Just a basic budget. What are my expenses that I need to pay? What are the non-negotiables? What are my needs? What are my wants? Have a look at how much do I have, and how do I now start splitting this pot of money? So for me, it's really basic things where you start. You don't start got the big, it's like the adage that says, how do you eat an elephant? You don't consume it all at once. It's one bite at a time. So start where you are with what you have. Start a budget. Then you grow from there. Once you have a discipline of saving, and saving is not this big thing. It's not a massive thing. You can start a 24-hour notice account where you can get your money in 24 hours. Start there. Then you can grow to a 32-day notice account. Then once you've got discipline, discipline and you feel, okay, now I've got some consistency, you go for longer term, fixed terms, and then you start growing into the investment space.
Yeah.
So for me, I think, there's all these principles and rules that we can have, but the big thing is around building consistency and having that discipline.
Yeah.
Motivation alone won't get you there, because the one day that you're not motivated, you're going to go straight to the bank and take your money out. But have a goal in mind. That's what works for me, certainly. If I've got a goal in mind, if I'm saving for something, or there's something that I want to achieve, that at least becomes my marker. And then I say, okay, how much do I need to get there? How long is it going to take me to get there? And I start very small, putting that stash of money away. Every now and again, whatever I have, if I've got a little bit extra, So for me, it's not, the principles aren't these massive big things that feel so overwhelming that they then even paralyze you from even starting. It's just start where you are with what you have. Get a budget, understand your expenses. Some people don't even know what you spend your money on. On a monthly basis, you don't know. I'll show 100 rand if I had 100 rands, I can show how I split it. Just having a basic understanding, or I spent 70 rands qua and 30 rands qua. Maybe next month I can make different choices, So start small, start with what you have, and just take small baby steps to where you need to get to.
I like that. The simplicity of it all. It's not all complex.
Yeah.
Because I think people think complicated. Like you were saying, kibo offshore, kibo's shares, ETFs, kibo in. No. Start with what you have. Some young people. And I was telling them, start at 20 rands.
That's it.
You'll be amazed. In 6 months, it's no longer 20 rands. Or if it's 100 rands, or 50 rands for that matter. Start with what you have. But it's the consistency thereof, that helps you, because then you begin to build the momentum. And when you see, wow, I started at the beginning of the year 100 rands. At the end of the year, I had 1,200. Hi, man, I can do better.
Exactly.
Next year, Musinganeka Kenya 150. And so that motivates you to do even more. So, for those who are watching us, even knowing, as simple as that, understanding, using that budget. But use a budget. When they hear budget, they think you're talking about something so foreign. Kanti, it's about just you becoming aware.
Absolutely.
Or what did I do with the money that I received? Being accountable.
Exactly.
For the money that you have received, that you worked so hard for,
that
by
you
the
work
way.
hard for.
Yeah.
I read something yesterday. It was a post on Instagram, and it was from a place that it's a fitness and health space. So I think their membership fee is like 1,000 rands or something a month. And they made the calculations to say, actually, you're going to spend that money on your health either way. Either you're spending it here at the gym with this membership, or you're going to buy coffees. A coffee every day that you buy actually equates to a little bit more than 1,000 rands a month. So either way, you are spending that money, and it's impacting your health. Which way do you want it to impact your health, right? And so it's these small little changes. Once you know where your money is going. If I know horena every month, ke reka, what do I like? Right? I must be very conscious about the amount of money I'm spending on having my nails done.
Yes.
And if I know, at the end of the year, I'm wanting to save for a new watch, a new fitness watch, I must either give up tabaya manala, or I'm not going to get the watch.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Yeah.
And it's those trade-offs that you then start making. But if I don't know, on a monthly basis, I'm spending X amount on manala, I'll always feel like I cannot chalete, or I don't know where my money is going.
Yeah. And one of the trade-offs that, we were making at home when we were talking, we were just reviewing the amount of money that we spend on takeaways. And we were saying, you know what, we're not going to be buying takeaways Friday and Saturday.
Yeah.
So we're going to have something that we make Montlu
Yeah.
on a Friday, so that that money can go towards something else, and maybe
else.
just have takeaways on a Saturday. And those
And
are the
it's those
trade-offs that you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So as we go to a close of our conversation, I want to go back to that part where you were talking about how, as women and people under general don't want to talk about money. We even, I'll put my makeup on. When people ask me, how are you really? I will not talk about the
fine.
fact that I don't have money. I'll put up this facade. I'd rather die on the inside. And sometimes we wonder why somebody committed suicide, because they were looking fine. They were okay, because we are so embarrassed to talk about money. And because of that, especially as women, we become open to financial abuse. And I want us just to talk a little bit about that, or, what are some of because I know you guys did a study around financial abuse and some of the things that one should look out for, when we talk about financial abuse. Yeah.
Sure. That's a topic very close to my heart. We are running I don't even want to call it a campaign, because it's not a marketing initiative. It's a way that the bank is trying to get involved in trying to solve a societal ill, particularly gender-based violence. And the way that we are wanting to do it is by being part of the conversation around financial abuse, which is actually one of the most insidious forms of gender-based violence, because it is hidden in plain sight. There's a stat that says 99% of abusive relationships, the reason why people stay, why women particularly stay in abusive relationships, is because of finances. That's 99%. That's almost 100% reasons why people stay in violent situations is because of finances. And we really wanted to surface the conversation and start talking about it and create the awareness. And what we discovered was really astounding, in that not a lot of people know what it even looks like.
Yeah.
Right? People experience it, but they didn't have the languaging for it, and they didn't know what it looks like. So things like, if someone is controlling your access to money, you can't even carry your own bank card.
Hey.
You can't even or patale for your own lunch when you go to lunch with the girls.
Hey.
Someone wants to see what's going on in your finances, someone controlling the money. There's some homes and families where right up front a decision is made that the wife will stay home and I will take care of you. Then when the time comes to take care of you, there are these control levers that are pulled around that money, and all of that. There's so many scenarios that capture financial abuse. And that's something that we really need to surface and start talking about. And what I found interesting was that oftentimes you'll think about abuse and financial abuse as an ill that affects, call it the lower spectrum of society from an economic perspective, and it really isn't. It crosses social boundaries, it crosses across class. You'll have a pretty looking woman, very smarty, holding a Louis Vuitton bag. Meanwhile, she doesn't own anything. Her name is not on any single asset, because the money and the finances are being controlled in that household. So absolutely, financial abuse is something that we need to stare down as a country, as a nation. And it's not just, it's actually not a female problem. I'd like to say, for us to end gender-based violence, it's going to take us and the men holding hands. So we need the men to be our allies in this fight against gender-based violence and financial abuse. Surface the conversation, educate each other, because I'd like to believe that there are some men who are finding themselves in these situations, but they too aren't aware. So how do we start creating that education and awareness, as opposed to driving the wedge even further? But as a nation, we really need to stare this down, and ultimately, I do believe we'll get to solve for gender-based violence as a whole.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that, Bulin. I think we definitely need to have, the conversations around money. We need to demystify this thing, ya gore money is a secret. And I think once we start doing that, it will then, also reduce the number of people that are experiencing this abuse, So gender-based violence is not only physical, it
Yeah.
can be financial and in other aspects. Well, we've had such a wholesome conversation. We started with savings and investing. We ended up here where we ended up. But thank you so much for sharing these wonderful nuggets with us. And I'm hoping that those that are watching, that are going to watch this episode, will take a whole lot of nuggets for themselves and really apply, some of the money lessons that we've shared. So thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. And to you at home that has been watching, thank you so much for the support. Share this episode with others, because we need to empower each other around investing, around, financial abuse and all other aspects around money. Until next time, thank you for watching.